Hey friends, welcome to season 7 of the Let's Get Real podcast. I'm Justin.
And I'm Trisha.
Every week, we have honest conversations about life, love, and leadership without the pressure to pretend.
Whether you're in a great season or a messy one, this space is for grace and truth and real connection.
And this season, we're diving into some powerful conversations with each other, with friends, and with leaders who are making a difference by leading from a place of authenticity.
So whether you're listening in the car, out on a walk, maybe just hiding in your pantry for a little peace and quiet, this podcast is for you.
Let's dive into season 7 and get real.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to today's episode with Justin and Trisha. What season is this that we're on?
This is season 7.
Okay, those that have been with us for 7 seasons know I'm not good at numbers. So season 7, but it's our first season being on YouTube, which has been pretty fun. And as you can see that Justin and I are in different places today. We're actually in our office. So if you're listening, you probably don't care. But if you are watching online, we are together in the same house, separate spaces. But today we are diving in. We've talked about this, Justin, that this season in particular, our guest, we never know how it's going to work out in their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously we know who our guests are and we vet that process, but the stories that have happened, how they've interwoven with our book, One Choice Away from Change, breaking cycles that hurt our relationships. And a lot of these conversations have been about people breaking cycles in their broken relationships. And so you and I talked about, let's talk about the different aspects of that through the book. And so today we're continuing that conversation.
Yeah, it's been really cool just to see how God has woven together. We have a strategy as far as who we're reaching out to or who reaches out to us, who we think is going to be great conversations for the listener and for us. So we're learning stuff every single week as we interview people. Yeah. But it's been really cool just to see how God has woven the story and the heart behind One Choice Away from Change with some of our guests. And so today we're talking about something that I think has been a part of, I think you and I have done over 40 podcast interviews since our book came out in March, which is crazy. Yeah.
I won't remember that number, but I do appreciate you sharing it.
But one of the things that people really hone in on in every single interview is the idea of how we speak a lot. And this podcast really originated with not being perfect, but allowing the mess of our life to tell the story of God's redemption. Right. Yeah. That sometimes we try to sanitize our life. We try to sanitize and clean up our spiritual life before we actually come to God. And that's really not how God meets us the best, that God meets us best in the mess. And so we're going to talk about a little bit about what you deem the messy middle of life and just some things that, we've experienced in our own life. Neither of us can keep a straight face because
Justin and I, we always talk about kind of pre-show, like what we're talking about and what God's laid on our heart. And so Justin's like, I'm going to share the story. And I'm like, babe, you have never publicly shared the story with anybody but our kids. And I don't think you told our kids until
5 years later.
Yeah, 5 years later. So we're talking about the messy middle. And so we're going to talk about a very actually personal, messy story. And
if you're eating right now, you may want to stop eating or restart this podcast after you're done eating.
It's not that bad, but the story begins with the Davises on vacation. And if you know anything about us, we talk about the Davis cloud because crazy things happened to us. Like on our wedding night when we were traveling, we've actually shared different parts of our first night together of all the things that went wrong. But the next day, as we made the trek to where we were going for our honeymoon, there was a hay truck in front of us that lost its hay and the hay was all over the interstate. And so you and I being young kids, we're like, we're going to help out. We get out.
Yep. It's 107 degrees in the middle of Kentucky.
It's so hot. You can
I-64.
Google.
I'll never forget it. I-64.
1995, I-64 or I-64.
64, yeah. No, 64 between
64.
Louisville and Lexington.
Yes. And you guys, the hay got swept up underneath the hay truck, caught the hay truck on fire, and blew it up. So that's not the story we're sharing. I'm just saying, like, the story we're about to share is one of many iterations of the crazy that happens. But this journey was a family trip. And I'm just going to say, Justin, you were super grumpy.
I was. And guys, I want you to know, we've talked about this before. My family knows that I love going on vacation. I typically am the primary planner as far as like, I'll bring Trish, 3 or 4 different houses. I'll do all the research. Here's how we can travel. Here's, flights. I mean, I'm excited about vacation until we spend the money for vacation.
Yeah.
And then
you like the planning because you like the fact that you feel like you find deals. So it's more about the deal making than the planning.
So I have to work really, really hard. Like when we go to the Crab Trap and it's $762 for 5 people to eat. I have to work really hard to not be a jerk as I'm paying the bill for dinner. Even though I'm the one that said,
Crab Trap is not like high-end food, y'all. It's not like the Crab Trap is, I mean, it's in the name.
Yes. But I mean, even though I'm the one that said, let's go to dinner and all the kids are like, really, Dad, you really want to go to dinner and spend the money? I'm like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. And then I'm a jerk the rest of the evening after I paid the bill for dinner. So we get to Florida. We go to the same place pretty much every year, 30A. That's our place. And now we're like a day into vacation and I've been really grumpy and I've told Trish, I'm not feeling good. And she translates I'm not feeling good into I'm mad about how expensive this vacation is. And so I'm just sitting on the beach. She perceives that I'm pouting and I'm just sitting there. I'm quiet. I'm not in a great mood. I'm not in a bad mood. I'm just melancholy is how I would describe it.
Okay, I want to say we need to fact check a little bit in this story. It wasn't the second day. It may have felt like the second day because of where you were. We had just gotten there and unpacked our bags and went to the beach.
Yeah. Okay.
And you were grumpy day one going into that first night. So we hadn't even spent money yet and you were sideways.
So I keep telling her, I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. We go to dinner. We come back. We go to bed. I can't believe I'm going to share this story. So it's like 2 in the morning. And I wake up to an horrendous smell. I cannot.
I do want to say, you and I fought. Like we went to bed angry at each other.
Yes,
so
yes.
I just want to preface that I wasn't in the headspace to be kind when you woke up.
I wake up to a horrendous smell and I can't place it. I don't know where I'm at. We're in a different bedroom, in a different city, in a different bed. And all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like, what is that smell? And then I'm like, what is that feeling? And so I throw the covers off of me. And you guys, I had crapped the bed.
So Justin is very much
I wake Trish up and I don't say anything other than, are you freaking happy now? I crapped the bed. I told you I don't feel good.
Except you did not use that word. So we'll bleep out what really said.
Well, this podcast is marked for non-explicit talk or lyrics.
Yes.
And so I can't say what I really said.
Yeah.
But you guys, I wasn't feeling good. And thankfully, Trish finally gained an ounce of empathy and said,
listen, I'm usually empathetic to you.
You are.
Usually but we went to bed mad.
I had no credibility. I I was, you know, I was a repeat offender for being a jerk on vacation. So you had every right to believe that I was just being pouty. So then we had to, in somebody else's house, figure out what to do with crappy bed sheets and where to find new bed sheets. But here's why we share that story, because no matter how bad of a vacation you've ever had, I bet that no adult, unless they're over 85, has ever crapped the bed.
Oh my gosh.
And so it took me about 5 years to ever tell my kids that story. And it's taken me, I think, 11 years to ever share this story publicly. And so whatever it takes for the Let's Get Real podcast.
Okay. So everybody's like, oh, okay. What does that have to do with our topic today? So today we are talking about the messy middle.
Unavoidable messes in life.
Unavoidable messes. And here's the thing that's true for Justin's story as well, but maybe in your life, if you are in a season where things are messy and you don't feel like you're being listened to, or you are talking yourself kind of off the ledge of like, no, I really don't feel like this. I feel fine. But really, like, everything feels like it is absolutely on fire all around you.
There's a crap show.
Stop derailing me. Okay. But the question is, what do you do when life is messy? And what we recognized in our own life, and maybe true for you in yours, is that they're always literally in the middle of everything. Like, they're never convenient. And it's just like, life gets messy, people get messy. And so what we end up doing is we just try to figure out what's the short-term fix.
Yeah.
And so we sweep it under the rug, we put it in the closet,
we throw it in the washer.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
You remember that Kmart commercial where it said, "I just shipped my bed"? That was true for me that night.
We digress. But the reality is that life does get messy, and usually we're so overwhelmed in the midst of it that quick fix feels like wisdom. Okay, I will deal with it later, so I'm just going to shove it in the closet. And then something else happens, and a season of life gets messy, and a relationship gets difficult, or job gets difficult, and it really is a whole different mess that was put in the closet before. But again, it's another mess, and you're too busy to deal with it, so you shove it in the closet again. Eventually, each and every one of us have had a moment in our lives where we went for the closet, tried to shove it in again, and this time there was no room, and so it went spilling out, like everything everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to recover from this story.
Well, one of the things that I really love about just what God has taught you through the messy seasons of our life, one of the things that we've recognized is, if it was just one mess, if it was just a financial difficulty, or if it was just a problem with a kid, or if it was just a broken down friendship, or if it was just a problem at work, then we have the capacity usually to deal with it and manage it. What happens a lot of times is they get layered on top of each other. And it's not the one mess that trips us up. It's not the one disappointment that sets us back. It's not the one relational breakdown that really hurts us. It's all of those things compiled on each other to where we feel like it's not just this area of my life that's messy. My life is a mess. My relationship with God is a mess. Every relationship I have is a mess, right? And so it becomes this overwhelming feeling of something is wrong with me, or something is wrong with God, or God is punishing me, or I've done something that is unforgivable, irreparable. And what I love about the wisdom that I feel like you bring to this conversation is, one, you give permission to feel emotions in the middle of our mess, to where we don't have to sanitize. our life for God to accept us. So I think that's valuable. But also, I think it's just this recognition that if you are going through a season like that, where there is something that feels so broken, one, you're not disqualified. Two, you're not being punished. There is a capacity growing aspect that can take place when we embrace the messy middle of our life and recognize that God is doing something in the middle of that is for our good and for his glory, even when it doesn't feel like it.
And I was surprised that I was reading Genesis, and I can't remember why I landed in there. And it struck me for the first time that since the beginning, when God created us, like in the garden, there's this story of these two trees. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's the tree of life. And the way that the Bible shares it is that like both trees are there. And it's interesting that like they're literally planted in the middle of the garden. And it's like, okay, God gives us an opportunity, for Adam and Eve in those first beginnings of humanity was the beauty of choice. They could choose to eat from the tree of life, but then God said, to stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where, a lifetime of messes lived in that tree. And so they eat the fruit, and then all of a sudden, it's the Bible says that their eyes were open and suddenly they felt shame and blame. And I think those are two words that it's like when life gets messy, the first aspect of it is, yeah, sure, we're overwhelmed. And so we tuck it away. But then we believe the lie that we've put it up and we don't have to deal with it. The
They
problem
hid
is,
behind fig trees, the fig
right,
leaves, right? Like
right,
that
yeah,
they're hiding, thinking that they're escaping
right.
God.
But what they bring with them is shame and blame. And so in the context of our lives, oftentimes we think that we've put it away, but really we maybe have put a portion of it away. What we keep carrying with us is shame and blame and guilt. And so a lot of the conversations we have with people is like, well, what do you do when life is messy? And you know me, I like me a plan. Like if God would just tell me, hey, girl, life is going to get really hard for you, but here's the plan. I'd be like, okay, I trust you. I think this is crazy, but like, okay, I can follow a plan. But the thing about being in the messy middle, it's like, it just doesn't feel like there is a plan. There doesn't feel like a way of escape. There doesn't even feel like there's a way to deal with it. And every person I've talked to is like, yeah, if I knew how to get out of this mess, I would have done it.
Yeah.
And so the question is, when life is messy, how do you break that cycle of just shoving it away and say, I'll deal with it later, but then really recognizing that later will not come. Like that guilt and shame carries with you in other aspects of messiness in life. Sometimes your mess that you create, and sometimes messes that have been created that we've brought into.
Yeah.
And what I've recognized is one of the biggest gifts that we can give to ourselves is just that. It's an invitation to feel our emotions and what we would call grief.
That's so freeing to me because I've been able to, you and I have had just so many deep conversations about this because there are certain things that we've talked about on the podcast of messes that we have created or that, that my choices created for us 20 years ago. And we try to leverage those things to help other people. But then, 2022, 2021, 2022, 2023, there were choices that were made by other people that wounded us. There were circumstances that were beyond our control with COVID that affected our ability to lead the church and really our mental and emotional and spiritual health. And so having this season where everything just felt like a mess. And when that happened, what I began to feel is I'm a failure. People know that I'm failing. I felt embarrassed. I felt withdrawn. I felt depressed. And knowing that I didn't have to have it all together to be accepted in my marriage, I didn't have to have it all together to be accepted by my kids. There wasn't a timeline, right? I wasn't going to stay where I was, but it wasn't like I've got to figure this out or Trisha's going to think I'm a failure. I've got to figure this out or my kids are going to think I'm a failure. There was permission given to grieve. There was permission given to confess. There was permission given to be vulnerable. And that was a game changer for me because I knew that God was not absent, even though he felt silent. I knew that he wasn't absent, but I didn't feel the pressure that I have to get rid of this mess or I have to detangle it or I have to tie a bow around it. I felt permission that I can grieve. I can identify, I can name it, but then also I can trust that a layer at a time, God is going to allow me to peel it back, identify it, understand it, and move through it. And I think so often what happens is we want to move on rather than move through. And when you try to move on from your mess, what you do is you end up compounding it. You end up, as you said, bringing it with you, or you end up affecting other people in your life unintentionally with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the choice in it is to actually choose the mess. Like when you choose the mess, then the response is to recognize how it's making you feel. And I remember, I don't even know how I found Kay Bruner's Stages of Grief. I may have been in school still for my undergrad, and maybe that's where I found it. I did, that's right, because there was a whole section on grief. And she has this really great example of like what grief is. And she talks about that it's shock, numbness, denial, anger, disorganized, like that's messy, panic, loneliness, depression. And I know it's like, gosh, but basically what she was saying is like, grief we use almost like as this word, we need to grieve, but the nuances of grief are even messy. In fact, if you are watching, I'm going to pull up our book and show you, like, you can see, like, this is Kay's, that way. This is Kay's little example of like what she says it looks like. And then, but she says really what grief is, she puts the squiggly line to all of those different things. If you're just listening, imagine like a deep cavern of all of these feelings. And it looks like maybe you would just like be in the flow of it. You go from one side, take the deep dive and get on the other. But really grief in itself is messy. The difference is that it's a redemptive mess. It's where instead of just sitting in it and being overwhelmed or being shamed by it or finding people to blame, when you allow yourself to grieve, it loosens the mess doesn't feel as overwhelming anymore because you're starting to give your wounds a name. And so there may be aspects of your life that feels messy that you are angry over. And anger is a gift. A righteous anger says that what is happening is wrong and it propels us to do something different. In grief, we can feel, feelings of depression and feeling like hopelessness. But when we start to name that, then we get to go, okay, but is it really? Is there nothing left in the midst of this that could be changed? And so when we choose our messes, we actually lessen the power of the mess and we get back into control to say, okay, I'm going to allow myself to be upset. I'm going to allow myself to be exactly where I am at and recognize that, yes, my life is messy and I'm still here.
so powerful and so good. And as you were talking, I was almost having like almost scenes from the Gospels flash before me where Jesus would meet people in their mess. Like the leper, right? Like lepers were ostracized. They were not allowed to live inside the city walls. They were deemed to be unclean. And there was this perception that if someone had leprosy, that leprosy was a sign of either their sin or their parents' sin. So there was a spiritual connection to a physical, their spiritual judgment to a physical condition. Right. And so you had this very visible mess that was on the outside, but it really, what the Jewish people believed was it was a reflection of a heart condition, that person was being judged by God. And yet Jesus meets a leper and he doesn't just heal him, he touches him. And it was just this reminder as you were speaking that there is no mess that's too big for God. There's no mess that's too audacious for Jesus to touch, to approach, to meet you in. And there's just such a comforting thought that once you identify it, once you embrace it, once you say, I am a mess, lepers had to announce unclean. They had to basically verbally say, I am a mess. And yet that wasn't intimidating for God. And Jesus met them there. And so I, as you're listening to this, hopefully you recognize that no matter how bad your financial situation is, no matter how broken a relationship with a child is, no matter, how messy your marriage might feel, that Jesus can meet you in the middle of that mess.
It's interesting. In the book, I share the story of Justin and I, finding out that our dads aren't our dads. And that, in that season of writing the book, that was our messy middle. And, I'll speak on my behalf on my journey. There was so much of my story, like everything I thought about myself as growing up, and my dad being, Hispanic, and just all of my life, it felt like in one moment, all of that was blown up. So it wasn't like mine was situational. My whole being felt like a big hot mess. And so why I share that story is, one of the first things that I had to do is I had to name it. You have to name your mess. You name the season you're in. And for me, it was like, even though so much was broken, when I began to name it, it was actually giving me truth. So yeah, everything was not what I thought it was, but when I began to embrace it, okay, this has happened. I got to name it, and that gave me the ability to begin to grieve. It gave me the ability to be honest. And what is powerful about that, I think I say this, I've been saying this a lot lately, like the simplest things, the easiest things to say, the simplest things to do are always the hardest to live out. And so naming it sounds really simple, but it was difficult to name the fact that my dad was not my biological dad. It was hard to name that I have another father in my life. But what it allowed me to do is get honest. So I didn't go looking for a closet. I didn't go looking for the rug. I was okay with being messy. And that was the first time, and all the stuff that we've talked about on our podcast, of all the crazy that we have been through, one of the hardest experience of my life actually became my biggest breakthrough, because I got okay with being messy. And so
why do you think it's so hard for us to just to give permission, like give ourselves permission to name that? Like what I hear you saying is, it was by doing that, you actually didn't allow it to control you. You demonstrated power over it through Christ, right? It's not like you're controlling it, but it's almost like rather than allowing it to define you, you gave it definition.
Yeah.
right? Why do you feel like so many of us struggle to do that? Whether obviously not everything is as monumental as that, but even in little things, little messes, we
Yeah.
struggle to name it or acknowledge it or just give it a name so that we can begin to change. That's sometimes is the thing that holds us back the most.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, that's a great question. And there's an intersectionality to that. I think there's a cultural piece that plays into what who feels safe,
Hmm.
what's fake, what is real, what is oversharing, what is undersharing. It's just like, gosh, you don't even know. So it's just like, so I think there's the cultural piece that we don't even know what to do with our messes. So I think there's the cultural piece. Then I think that there is a theological piece,
Hmm.
a deep theological belief that messy equals sin. And it was like, oh, but we started, the narrative of humanity started with a choice to choose a mess. It's so interesting. Like, the choice has always been there. And why is the choice
Yeah.
there? Because God didn't force us to love him. He was giving us a choice. And so I think a lot of us don't choose it because those different pieces of culture, our theological understanding, our relationships of what we grew up with, of what was okay to share. I mean, I talked to so many people that were like, we would never share our feelings like that. My parents would think we're crazy, like sometimes it's a generational thing. So
Yeah.
there's so many different aspects that it's just not one thing. But I do think where I get excited about the messy middle is, for each and every one of us, we have a choice to embrace it and learn from it and grow from it in a beautiful way. And something that, I haven't shared publicly, and I don't know if he's listening, but I did meet my biological dad over the summer, and he told me that he listens to the podcast. And
Which is an out of body experience, kind of, quite honestly.
yeah, and I'm going to preface this that there's a lot of the story that I'm not going to share, that I'm just not ready to share. But I was able to have that first time conversation with him. We met, and he is a very gentle man, and it was interesting. There's this duality of almost feeling like I'm betraying my dad, who raised me and who I love and is deeply, will forever be my father. He is my dad. And then my biological dad, and kind of his perspective and story of how he's been absent from my life and why. It was a whole other set of messes.
Hmm.
But why it was healing is it didn't take away the pain of my story. It didn't take away, you know, all that unfolded. But what it did do is, because I knew these different options to do with my mess rather than shove it in the closet, never talk to him, never want to know. And there was a season I felt that way. By meeting with him, I was able to sit in the mess and be okay that we did not walk away from that first conversation with everything tied up in a bow.
Yeah.
But what it did is it allowed me to see that God, he, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And what I realized, especially from a theological perspective, is that God's not waiting to meet us when we're through the mess. He says he's going to meet us in the mess. It is
Yeah.
why the very first thing that God does in the garden is he goes searching, and he
Yeah.
says, where are you? And
Yeah.
so again, such a simple statement to make of, what do you do in the mess, rather than putting it in the closet or shoving it under the rug. By just simply naming it, it changes its power over you. So that, first and foremost. Second, when we grieve, it means we're getting honest with it. It's like we've allowed ourselves to, break the closet door and be like, I'm not even going to put the door back up there because I don't want to use that. I want to find healing. And I think that you have seen this, and you share with people kind of the perspective of, maybe the person listening or watching is in the same, not, well, hopefully you're not in the same, but you truly feel really messy right now. And it has nothing to do even close to Jess and I's story, but life feels really messy, and you're like, okay, I understand the grief part, but that feels like a one-time event. What does it mean? What would you say to them to encourage them? What does that mean to live it out in the daily grind of life that often gets us in trouble of distraction, that we just don't deal with it?
Yeah. One of the things that I just appreciate about you is you're not on this podcast talking about hyperbole and hypothetical situations. You're unwilling to give people advice that you're not following or living out yourself. And so just watching the courageous act of running into the mess of meeting your biological father and knowing the pain that it was not easy. It was a painful reality that you were facing. But I think from my standpoint, even from our kids' standpoint, there was just such pride and such like, dang, that was just, I don't know, that was just bad A. I mean, just it was just amazing. The strength, the fortitude that you demonstrated. It was like, I am grieving, but I'm also trusting God in that grief. And one of the things that I love about scripture is the Bible says that God is close to the brokenhearted. And so there's almost like this aspect of God's presence that we only get through grief. Like if you think about the one time that the Son of God grieved, when did he do it? He did it when his friends were crying over the loss of their brother. And so it's like there's this godly empathy that we get to feel when we're willing to grieve, when we're willing to name our situation and go to some really dark places and really hard places. And so we can look for God's presence in the midst of that grief. And that's when God shows up the most, I think, is when we're honest, when we're in the mess, and when we have no other hope other than the hope of Christ, we see the presence of God in most clear ways. I've been looking for this article for literally almost 20 years. When you and I were separated, someone sent me an article that talked about the cancer survivors and how people who have cancer, they talk about the closeness that they feel with God's presence through that process. And the longer that they're in remission, cancer survivors actually long. They don't wish they had cancer again. They long for the feeling of God's presence that they had when they had cancer. And I think that that's what messes provide us. They provide us with an opportunity to recognize that we aren't God, but that God is right with us in the middle of our mess, that he doesn't just judge us for our mess. He climbs down into the pit with us, and his presence is most powerfully present in the midst of that pit.
And it's a timely message, right? Because for our listeners who live in the United States, things feel really messy culturally on so many different levels. Lots of sides taken. We have listeners from all around the world, and it's this reality that when we open ourselves up to share messes, what we recognize is that God is for all people for all time. And it's this reminder that there's, some cultures that have been under persecution their whole entire life. And when I make that statement is it's a litmus test of kind of our heart. When I make that statement, if you feel like, oh, that shamed me, like, theirs is so hard, so I shouldn't feel hard, that's when we know we've got some stuff stuffed in the closet. But when we hear somebody say, I live in a country that has been under, a lot of duress for a multitude of reasons, and God found me.
Yeah.
What happens is we learn from that. And what we recognize is that we don't have to live behind closets, that it's not a place of shame when we perceive the world from God's lens, and we see the world holistically, regardless of what country, what state, which city, what town, that God meets Adam and Eve in the garden, and he meets us today. And what is true for all of us is just like what you said. It's like, this is where life change happens, even when circumstances may stay the same, or when circumstances feel like they'll never change. We change. And that's the beauty of the messy middle. And so, we always say we try and go first to help you go second as the listener. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm tapped out. I'm like, okay, God, I'm good. This is why we have
any more stories to tell.
This is why we have a guest on our podcast. But my encouragement to you today is, if you feel like you are messy, there's two things I want to encourage you to do. And the first is there a safe person that you can be honest with to name it? Not to get advice, not to get it fixed, but just to be seen, a person who, like God said, where are you? Who's your where are you person that maybe you've been hiding from because, I don't know, you've convinced yourself you've been too messy. You've convinced yourself maybe they don't want to know about your mess. I want to encourage you to reach out, not from what they will give you, but actually what you'll give to yourself, and just being able to name it. And the second thing is I want to encourage you to challenge God. He can handle it. And so if you are in a season of grief and you feel stuck, like you're grieving and you're just angry at the world, you can't figure out why you're angry, whatever that description word is, I want to encourage you, like, the statement I was going to make is probably not appropriate, but like, just bring it all and know that he is able to not only handle it, but like Justin said, like, meet you in the midst of your pain.
So good. So good. Guys, if you are in a season of feeling like you're in a mess, we hope that this episode has been encouraging to you and has met you right where you are. And maybe it's just a reminder that God sees you. He hears your prayers, and he may have brought this episode to you at just the right time. Maybe you're like, man, these people are really crazy, and that has nothing to do with me, but maybe you know a friend that's in the middle of a mess that you could share this podcast with. You could text them a link, or send them an email with a link to the podcast that helps spread the message that we feel like God's laid on our heart to help people, find healing from their messes. So we hope this episode has been an encouragement. It's not been sponsored by Ancestry.com, and it's not been and it's not been sponsored by Tide with Clorox bleach. Although we're open to sponsorships. But guys, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Let's Get Real podcast. It doesn't get much more real than this. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for joining us for another honest conversation. We hope that something in today's episode encouraged you, maybe even challenged you.
Our heart is to help you live with more connection, more purpose, and really more authenticity in every aspect of your life.
If this episode meant something to you, would you do us a favor? Would you leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast? It helps more people find these conversations.
Or better yet, share it with a friend. Shoot somebody a text message today. Let them know what you're listening to, because you never know how God might use that to encourage somebody else.
We'll see you next time right here on the Let's Get Real podcast.